Some mornings change everything. This one had been 16 months in the making. My son was thrown out of his home at 6:17 in the morning. I know the exact time because I've been parked 2 houses down, engine off, coffee going cold in the cup holder, since 5:45. When he came through that front door, he wasn't storming out. He wasn't leaving. He was being removed. There's a difference, and if you've ever watched someone you love experience it, you know exactly what I mean. He sat down on the concrete steps, slowly, carefully, because he was holding his 4-year-old daughter, still asleep, her head against his shoulder, completely unaware that her whole world was being rearranged around her, and he was not going to jostle her, not even now, not even in this. 2 suitcases sat beside him on the step. 2. 8 years of marriage. A home he thought was his. A job he thought was real. A life he thought he'd built with his own hands. 2 suitcases. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't pound on the door that had just locked behind him. He just sat there, staring at the ground, with the look of a man who has had the last of his soul quietly pulled out of him while he wasn't watching. I sat in my truck, and I looked at my son. And the thing that tightened in my chest, the thing that made it hard to breathe in that moment, wasn't what I was seeing. It was that I had known this day was coming. For 16 months, I had watched every sign that my son refused to see. I had mapped the man who had been engineering all of it. I had planned for this exact morning, worked out every detail, prepared every piece. And none of that, not one single piece of it, had prepared me for the sight of my own child sitting on a curb in the early morning cold, still holding his little girl like she was the only real thing left. He didn't know I was there. He had no idea I had been waiting for this morning for over a year. And he had absolutely no idea that the man who had just thrown him out had made the biggest mistake of his life. Because behind that door, inside that marriage, inside that family, there was a secret. A secret worth millions of dollars. A secret I had been carrying in an envelope, locked in the drawer of my study for months. One that, if my son ever read it, would shatter him completely. Let me back up. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 63 years old. Retired structural engineer. I live in the mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina, in the same house where I raised my son Caleb alone, after we lost his mother Eleanor to ovarian cancer when the boy was 12 years old. I'm telling you that so you understand the shape of us. We are quiet people. We fix things. We don't make a lot of noise, and we don't ask for anything we haven't earned. Caleb grew up to be the kind of man who still writes thank you notes by hand, actual handwritten notes, and means every single word. He became a high school history teacher, American history, public school, Asheville. And if you want to know everything important about a person's values, look at what they're willing to be underpaid to do. He chose a classroom over a paycheck every single time, and he never once complained about it. He didn't marry for money either. He married a woman named Marsh because he loved her laugh, because she remembered small things people told her, the kind of small things that most people let slide right out of their heads and brought them back up weeks later like they mattered. Because she did. I believe she loved him. I still believe that. She is not the villain in this story. I need you to hold on to that because it matters more than you think right now. Dilea's father is a man named Roland Marsh. If you've ever driven through Buncombe County, you've seen that name on buildings. Roland owns 6 commercial properties downtown, 2 auto dealerships off the interstate, and the kind of quiet, consistent influence that gets phone calls returned within minutes, any time of day. He walks into rooms and waits. He has never, in his entire adult life, learned how to be uncomfortable. The first time I shook his hand, I knew he was the most dangerous kind of man. Not because he was mean, not because he was crude or loud or obviously threatening. Because a man who has never been told no will eventually decide that the word simply doesn't apply to him. Caleb brought them to my house for a holiday dinner 3 autumns ago. Delia was warm. She asked real questions and actually listened to the answers. She helped clear the table without being asked. She laughed at the right moments and stayed quiet at the right moments. And I liked her. Roland walked through my home the way a building inspector walks through a structure he's already decided to condemn. He didn't say anything cruel. He didn't have to. He paused a half-second too long before he called my place charming. Like he'd reached for that word from a very high shelf and handed it to me like something expensive he was letting me borrow. I handed him sweet tea. I smiled. And for the rest of that evening, I watched him the way I used to watch structural load calculations, looking for the points where the math didn't add up. By the time he left, I had the whole man mapped. And I did not like the blueprint. I said nothing. A man's happiness deserves a clear run before you start pointing at cracks. So I filed it away. Filed it right alongside everything else I was keeping an eye on. That's what I do. I file things. I built a career out of knowing which details matter before anyone else thinks to look. They married 8 months later at Roland's estate. 200 guests. An open bar that never once ran dry. Roland gave a toast that was actually, if you listened carefully, a speech about himself. About the high standards he'd raised his daughter to expect. About the responsibility of joining a family like the Marshes. He said it warmly. Everyone laughed in all the right spots. Caleb laughed too. I didn't. I drove home that night, turning one word over in my hands. Responsibility. The slight weight he had put on it. The way it sounded less like a blessing and more like a lease with a clause nobody had read aloud yet. I parked in my driveway and sat in the dark for a while. Then I went inside and wrote the date down. The first entry in a journal I would keep for over a year. My granddaughter came 14 months into that marriage. 6 pounds, a full head of dark hair, a chin that was pure Caleb. He called me from the hospital at 2 in the morning, and his voice was a voice I had never heard from him before. Cracked wide open, raw and new, and completely unguarded. "Dad," he said, "she's here. She's perfect. I can't even... Dad, she's just perfect." I drove through the empty mountain dark and sat at that nursery glass for a long time. They named her Nora. And something settled into my son the day Nora arrived. The way ballast settles into the hull of a ship and finally lets it ride steady. He'd always been a good man. Now he was anchored. He read to her every single night. He signed up to coach a soccer team full of kids who could barely walk straight. He was her father in every way that has ever counted. I need you to hold on to that sentence. Every way that has ever counted. The trouble didn't arrive all at once. It never does with men like Roland Marsh. It comes in small, disconnected pieces that only reveal a picture when you finally lay them side by side on a flat surface and step back. About 8 months after Nora was born, Caleb mentioned that Roland had offered him a job. Not a teaching position, not anything in education. Roland wanted Caleb to serve as a community liaison, which is a polished way of saying he wanted a well-liked, well-respected schoolteacher to be a friendly face for real estate projects that needed community goodwill and didn't want to earn it the hard way. "He wants me to leave teaching," Caleb told me. "But Dad, it's 3 times the money." I asked what Delia thought. He paused, just a beat too long. "She thinks I should take it." I asked what he thought. He said he was considering it. I told him to take his time. I said nothing else. He took the job 2 months later. I visited his new office on the 4th floor of Roland's flagship building downtown. Big windows, leather chairs, a lot of mahogany that felt borrowed instead of earned. Caleb was wearing a suit that didn't quite look like him yet, like a boy wearing his father's jacket, but he was proud of it. And I was proud of him for being proud. And underneath all of that, I was sick with a worry I couldn't name out loud yet. Because here's what 63 years has taught me about powerful men and free gifts. When someone hands you something for nothing, they are not giving. They are installing a lever. And one day, on a morning of their choosing, not yours, they are going to pull it. It was my neighbor Sam who put me on the road I hadn't thought to walk yet. Sam has worked family law for almost 30 years. He's not my attorney. He's the man I've shared a fence line and 1,000 Saturday morning coffees with since before Caleb could drive. One evening, I was thinking out loud on my porch, not accusing, not alarmed, just thinking. And Sam went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very carefully, Roland gave him the job. Did he ever give him an actual contract? I didn't know. I called Caleb that night, casual as I could make it, just curiosity. No contract. Month to month, classified as an independent contractor. More flexible for both of us, Roland had told him. Sam looked at me over his coffee the next morning and didn't say a single word. He didn't need to. That was the morning I started keeping real notes. I want to stop here and speak to you directly for a moment. If you have ever sat across from someone you love, someone you would walk through fire for, and realized they've walked straight into a trap with a smile on their face, and that telling them would only make them defend the person who set it, then you know the specific loneliness I'm describing right now. You can see the whole picture. You can't say it yet, so you carry it alone. I carried it for a long time. 5 months into that journal, Delia came to my house alone. That had never happened before. I made her coffee. She sat at my kitchen table and stayed quiet for a long while before she spoke. Walter, she said, I need you to know I love Caleb. I told her I knew. And I love Nora more than anything in this world. I knew that too. She looked down into her cup. My father has ideas about how things should be, about what Nora's life should look like. And sometimes his ideas and Caleb's aren't. They don't always. What kind of ideas? I asked. She looked up, and what I saw in her face was a woman standing at a fork in a road she never chose and wasn't sure she was allowed to walk away from. He wants Nora raised a certain way, the right schools, the right people. He calls it the right foundation. She stopped. He thinks Caleb is a good man, but not. Not what? I said. She didn't answer. She finished her coffee and left 20 minutes later. She hugged me at the door, longer than she ever had. I stood in my kitchen after that door clicked shut, and I did not move for a long time. That night, I called Sam. And then I did something I had never imagined doing in my life. I hired a private investigator. His name was Dean Holloway. Sam vouched for him. He was quiet, patient, and thorough. 3 qualities I respect above almost everything else. I asked him to map the financial structure between Roland Marsh and my son. What Dean found went so far past what I had feared that I had to read the report twice. The house, the brick colonial in the leafy neighborhood where Caleb and Delia were raising Nora, the house I had assumed they'd purchased together as a married couple, was owned entirely by a holding company Roland controlled. Caleb's name was nowhere on the deed. It never had been. Roland had called it a wedding gift and simply never transferred a single thing. Legally, on paper, Caleb had lived in that house for years without owning 1 square inch of it. The salary came through a third-party LLC. The entire arrangement meant Roland could end it on any morning he chose, with none of the legal protections a real employment relationship carries. And the prenuptial agreement, the one Caleb had signed with a lawyer Roland recommended, was written in language Caleb's own attorney had called standard at the time, but which Sam, reading it 3 years later, called extraordinarily one-sided. I read that prenup on a Tuesday at my kitchen table. I read it twice. Then I sat back and thought about the word charming. Now I have to tell you the part that changed everything. Not the house, not the money, not the LLC. This is the part that kept me up at night and turned everything I did afterward into something cold and exact and completely without hesitation. In the course of his investigation, Dean spoke to a nurse who had briefly worked at the clinic Delia used during her pregnancy. The nurse was long gone from that office. She had no loyalty to anyone. She told Dean that during a difficult prenatal appointment, Delia had confided that she was not certain Caleb was Nora's biological father. I sat with that for 3 days. 3 full days, doing nothing, just holding it. Then I built a careful, quiet plan. I told Caleb I was finally putting together a proper family health history, something Eleanor and I had always meant to do, and her cancer had made me realize how much it mattered. I said I wanted blood types, basic genetic markers, and that it would mean a lot to include Nora's too. I found a home kit, said we'd make a little project of it. Caleb thought it was a beautiful idea. He had no idea I was also sending a separate cheek swab, one Nora had given me during one of her weekends at my house, what she called Grandpa Camp, to a private laboratory on its own. The results came on a Wednesday. I read the envelope once. Then I slid it into the drawer in my study, underneath the journal. Caleb was not Nora's biological father, and I want to be absolutely clear about what I did next. Nothing. I made no call. I gave no sign. I did not breathe a word. I sat with the heaviest piece of paper I have ever held in my hands. And instead of thinking about lawyers or confrontations or what I was owed, I thought about a little girl who was almost 3 years old, who called me Grandpa Walt, who put strawberry jam on absolutely everything, and who was terrified of the drain in the bathtub. I thought about what she needed. And then I started building. Let me be honest with you about something, because I owe you that. If that envelope had landed in your hands, I genuinely don't know what you would have done. I don't know that I would judge you for any of it. The natural human thing, the thing every instinct in your body screams at you to do, is to feel that betrayal and let it pour out of you. But I kept coming back to Nora's face. And a betrayal you broadcast cannot protect anybody. So I swallowed it. For her. I spent the next 8 months in slow, deliberate preparation. Sam helped me find Caleb a real attorney, a sharp, quiet man out of Charlotte named Marcus Webb, with absolutely no connection to the Marsh family or their usual network of legal relationships. I paid the retainer myself, out of savings I'd been quietly setting aside since Eleanor died, money I had always meant to be Caleb's someday. This just turned out to be when. We documented everything. The deed situation, the LLC, the prenup, and exactly where it collided with North Carolina family law. Dean kept digging and found 2 former Marsh employees who had been pushed out in strikingly similar ways. I called both of them. I listened. One of them, a man named Errol, who had managed 3 of Roland's properties for nearly a decade, said something I wrote down on a legal pad and kept. He doesn't fire you, Errol told me. He arranges things until you've got no choice but to walk. Then he tells everyone you quit, and there's nothing on paper to prove otherwise. I looked at that legal pad. I thought about my son in his borrowed office, inside his borrowed house, with his borrowed title. And something inside me went very still and very certain. I did not tell Caleb any of it. Not because I didn't trust him. I trusted him completely. But because I knew him. He would have walked straight to Roland's office that same hour and demanded answers. He would have handed over every advantage we had, and Roland's attorneys, fast, experienced, and very well compensated, would have had a polished, prepared response before dinner. I had watched that man operate for years. He was never caught without a prepared position. I needed him caught without one. So I waited. And waiting, when you love someone and you can see the blade coming, is the hardest construction work there is. It came on a Thursday in October. I was in my living room when Caleb called, and his voice had that particular flatness, the way a voice goes when a man is holding himself together by sheer force of will and not much else. He locked us out, Dad. I asked him to slow down. My key card didn't work at the office this morning. Roland called at noon and said my engagement with the company was being terminated. I drove home, and the garage code wouldn't open. There was already a locksmith here. He stopped. Nora's inside. Dilea texted me. She said I should take some time, that things had gotten complicated. Dad, she sounded like she was reading it off a card. I closed my eyes for 2 full seconds. Where are you right now? In the driveway. Is Nora with Dilea? Is she safe? Yes, she's inside. She doesn't even know anything's wrong. Okay, I said. Call your attorney right now. Tell him it's time. Then come here. Silence on the line. Dad, what attorney? I don't have a... His name is Marcus Webb, I said. His number is already in your phone, under W. I put it there 6 months ago. Call him. Then come home. A long silence. Then, very quietly, You knew. Come home, son. That's all I said. He sat at my kitchen table for a long time after he got there. I put coffee in front of him and let him be quiet for as long as he needed. Then I sat across from him and I started at the very beginning. I told him everything. The journal, Dean's findings, the deed, the LLC, the prenup, exactly what it said and what it actually meant under North Carolina law. I set down one folder at a time and let him read each one. When I got to the lab results, I stopped. There's one more thing, I said, and I need you to hear it before you say anything. He looked up at me. I slid the envelope across the table. I want you to slow down with me here, because this is the moment everything, 16 months of silence, 16 months of watching and waiting and carrying, had been building toward. And it deserves to be lived second by second. He picked up the envelope. His hands were not steady, and he was trying not to show that they weren't. The kitchen was so quiet. I could hear the refrigerator hum, and the clock over the stove, and my own pulse in my ears. He opened it, read it slowly, eyes moving across the page once, then again. The way you reread something your mind refuses to absorb the first time. The color left his face, the same way it had left his face only once before, the night his mother passed. He set the paper down very carefully, the way you set something down when you no longer trust your own hands. Outside, a car went by. Down the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. Inside that kitchen, neither of us breathed. She's not mine, he said. It wasn't a question. Biologically, I said. He looked up at me. And I have never in my life wanted to take another man's pain into my own body the way I wanted to take his in that moment. I said the only true thing there was to say. That is the only way in which she is not yours. In every other way that has ever mattered, she is yours. She has always been yours. And that does not change because of what that piece of paper says. Not if I have anything to do with it. He pressed both hands over his eyes. His shoulders shook once. He didn't make a sound. I let him sit in it. I didn't reach for him. I didn't fill the silence. Because some grief has to be allowed to land, fully, completely, before a man can stand up under it. The clock ticked. The coffee went cold between us. Time stretched out the way it does at a graveside, where 1 minute holds the weight of an hour. And then, slowly, he lowered his hands. His eyes were red and wet and absolutely clear, and I watched my son, in real time, right in front of me, decide who he was going to be in response to the largest and most irreversible thing that had ever happened to him. "What do we do?" he said. "We already started," I told him. Marcus Webb filed the first documents the following Monday morning. The core of the case was straightforward, even if the work behind it was not. Roland's failure to ever transfer the house, despite calling it a wedding gift, despite letting Caleb and Delea raise a child inside it for years, had created enforceable legal rights under North Carolina law. A promise made and relied upon is not nothing, not in a courtroom. The LLC pay structure, with no real contract and no employee protections, gave Caleb a strong compensation claim. And the prenuptial agreement, reviewed now by an independent attorney with no ties to anyone named Marsh, had been signed under conditions that raised serious legal questions, because the lawyer Roland had recommended carried a 17-year professional relationship with the Marsh family that was never once disclosed to my son. Roland's attorneys responded within 48 hours. They were good. They were fast. They had clearly prepared for some version of a challenge. What they had not prepared for was the scope. Dean had spent over a year being thorough. Errol came forward with his own documentation, records he'd kept in a fireproof box in his garage for years, and his termination mirrored Caleb's so precisely that it established a clear pattern. The second former employee, a woman named Pet, had records of her own. And then there was what Delea did. I will not speak harshly of her. She was raised by a man who never once allowed her to make a decision that didn't ultimately serve his interests. But when she finally understood the full extent of what had been done, to her husband, to her marriage, to her daughter's family, she made a choice that I believe cost her more than anyone watching from the outside could see. She called Marcus Webb's office on her own. No prompting. No negotiation. She handed over documentation confirming the deed arrangement and the LLC structure, and she voluntarily, alone, unprompted, told Marcus Webb the truth about Nora's conception, a truth she had been carrying by herself for almost 4 years. I don't know what it took for her to lift that phone. I know exactly what it meant for us. The settlement took 4 months. Some of it is still sealed. Some of it doesn't matter to tell. What matters is this. The house was transferred into Caleb's name. The legal machinery Roland had spent years building to protect himself was used, correctly, properly, precisely, to enforce the promise he'd made and never honored. The compensation claims were settled. Caleb's finances were restored, then some, legal fees included. The prenuptial agreement was thrown out entirely. Roland never saw a jail cell. I want to be honest with you about that. What he did was structured carefully enough to stay on the civil side of the legal line. And I'm not naive about what money can purchase in that regard. But 2 of his largest commercial partners, once they saw the full pattern laid out in those proceedings, quietly walked away from him. A development deal he had been chasing for 3 years collapsed in the financing stage. The name stopped opening every door it used to open. I'll take that. I will take that all day. Here's where I owe you the part that goes beyond the ending. This whole thing taught me that the most dangerous people in your life are rarely the loud ones. They don't threaten. They don't intimidate. They smile. They give gifts. They offer opportunity. They build the cage one comfortable bar at a time, and by the time you notice, you are already inside it, and the door is already locked. The mistake most people make is believing that generosity always comes clean, that love and gifts and opportunity are always what they look like. They're not always. And the people who tell you not to worry about the paperwork, not to bother reading the fine print, not to get your own attorney to look at that before you sign, are almost always the ones counting on you not to look. So here is something practical you can do right now, today. If someone has given you a home, a job, a future, make sure your name is on the paperwork. Read the deed, read the contract, read the prenuptial agreement with a lawyer who has never met the other family. Love and legal signatures are not the same thing, and the gap between them is exactly where men like Roland Marsh live. I also want to say something about Delia, because the easy version of this story makes her a villain, and she isn't. She was a woman raised by a man who mistook control for love so completely that by the time she was grown, she couldn't always tell the difference either. What she did, carrying that truth alone for 4 years, and then choosing, at great personal cost, to come forward with it, that took more courage than anything else in this entire story. She didn't have to call Marcus Webb. Nobody made her. She did it because when it came down to the moment, she chose her daughter's family over her father's empire. I think about that choice more than I think about Roland. And what about Nora? She turned 4 in January. We had her birthday party right here, because Caleb is living with me for now while he figures out what comes next. She wanted a princess theme. So I spent a Saturday afternoon letting a not-quite 4-year-old jam a paper crown onto my head, while I sat on the back porch in the January cold and told her I was the king of the frozen mountain. She thought that was the single funniest thing that had ever happened in the history of the world. Caleb stood in the doorway watching us, working through something. Not grief exactly, not anymore. More like the slow, honest work of accepting a new shape for something you thought you understood completely. He picks Nora up and drops her off. He reads to her every single night when it's his time. He coaches that soccer team every Saturday morning, rain or cold or whatever February decides to throw at him. He has not faltered, not one single day. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty about keeping him in the dark for 16 months, about letting him walk through those months not knowing what I knew. I don't have a clean answer. What I know is this: if I had told him early, he would have walked straight to Roland from raw emotion instead of from strength. He would have ended up isolated, outlaw-yeared, and with no way out. What I built took time. It took silence. It took the discipline to hold a plan steady, while every single instinct I had was screaming at me to act. Was it right to keep my own son from knowing? I genuinely don't know. I know it was necessary. There's a difference between those two things, and living with that difference is its own kind of weight. Before I let you go, I want to hear from you, because I read every comment, every one, and your responses are a large part of why I keep telling these stories. I want you to answer honestly. Comment 1 if you think I did the right thing, that protecting him in silence was the right call, even if he didn't get to choose. Comment 2 if you believe a father owes his son the truth the moment he knows it, no matter the cost, no matter the timing. The truth is the truth. Comment 3 if you're somewhere in the middle and you're still turning it over. And wherever you're watching from right now, tell me. I love knowing how far these stories travel in the dark. Drop your city. Drop the time it is where you are. And if you've ever had someone with money or power look right through you and quietly decide that your life was theirs to rearrange, tell me about it. You are not as alone in that as you feel right now. If this story moved you even a little bit, subscribe before you go. It's just me and a small group of people who care about stories like this one. Every single subscriber genuinely keeps this channel alive. There are more stories coming. I'd like you here for them.